Good morning. Welcome to Revelation Ministry. Another early one. Today I got to take my son to a tournament, so we're going live a little early today so that I can do this, because I have to leave pretty much about the time that I would normally be ending preaching. Imagine if asked, each of you can offer an anniversary and a date that you remember or hold in significance in your heart and mind. Dates like November 22nd, 1963, when John F. Kennedy is assassinated. Or maybe April 19th, 1993, the invasion of the Branch Davidian stronghold in Waco, Texas. Or maybe April 4th of 1968, when Martin Luther King was killed. Or April 19th, 1995, the federal building in Oklahoma City was bombed. April 20th, 1999, when there was the gunfire and mayhem at the high school in Colorado, in Columbine. November 11th, at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, when Armistice Day was established, which now is and has become Veterans Day. Or maybe September 11th, when the World Trade Center and the Pentagon were attacked by terrorists. These dates caused a lot of disbelief that envelops our world and our country. There's tears that have been shed. Individual and corporate prayers have been expressed. Flags raised. Money has been given. Blood has been donated. And we join millions who always ask the question, why? We ask why. Why are we coming face to face with evil? Dealing with people that have a blatant disregard for human life. People who are angry, we're numb, grief-stricken, horrified, full of pain. And we come into the presence of God and we ask Him to make sense. Oh God, tell us why. Help us understand. And I've often felt the same way. Help me understand. But in our minds, there's no one that can provide answers. And that's why we come to church. In times where we don't understand, our hope comes from being together. And we know that the people sitting beside us, in front of us, across from us, they all share fundamental beliefs in Jesus Christ. And then in being here, watching, we can find hope. We can't make sense of it today, but we can find hope. In John, the book of John, it talks about the life of a grief-stricken. It discusses Mary and Martha's brother Lazarus, who died. And Jesus comes to be with his friends. And Mary runs out to Jesus and says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. She's honoring Jesus by suggesting his presence and power could have saved Lazarus. But I also hear in Mary's voice, where were you? Why weren't you here? And she's upset. But Jesus wasn't there to prevent Lazarus' death. Well, when someone dies, anger is normal. And to question God's role in death is normal as well. I'm sure that people are angry when these disasters overcome us and take over. And we ask the same questions. Why weren't you there? Why didn't you stop this from happening, Lord? And maybe you also have asked these similar questions. Where were you, God, when my father died of cancer? Where were you when my husband had a heart attack? Where were you when my child drowned? And it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be upset. But as Christians, as a group of believers who profess our faith and trust in God, how do we deal with being upset? Well, there's some of those that have chosen to deal with it by becoming violent themselves. 300 people attempted a march on a mosque in Chicago. People from various ethnic and religious groups have been beaten and received death threats. You can be angry as a Christian, but when you act on that anger and fuel further hate and violence, that's not what you're to do. Look at what Christ did. He went to be with Mary and Martha. In the midst of their grief and suffering, he came to be with them. He was there. And it's a clear indication that Christ was there in the midst of it all. And he's present now, comforting everyone. Comforting every grieving family member. Comforting each of you, just as he did for Mary and Martha. Christ's presence with Mary and Martha is an example of his compassion and love for them. But it was more than a friendly gesture, because John wrote that Jesus was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He was physically upset and cried. Jesus cried because he loved Lazarus. He cried because Mary and Martha were upset, and it disturbed him to see them in so much pain. There's pain everywhere in this world. Cries can be heard across the world. And God cries with us. He cries for those who are dying. He cries for their family and friends, knowing the pain and grief associated with the death of their loved ones. And we can't forget that God grieved the death of his Son. And as we are all God's children, he grieved again for all of us that have died. There was a story of a young boy who was sent to a corner store by his mother to buy a loaf of bread. He was gone much longer than it should have taken him. When he finally returned, his mother asked, "Where have you been? I've been worried sick about you." Well, he answered, "There was a little boy with a broken bicycle who was crying, so I stopped to help him." "I didn't know you knew anything about fixing bikes," his mother said. "I don't. I just stayed there and cried with him." Through his presence and tears, Christ made it known to Mary and Martha that he loved them and that he loves Lazarus and cries, and God cries. But the good news is that God can do more than that. He has the power to bring a glorious and miraculous outcome. The miraculous outcome in the scripture was Lazarus was raised from the dead. And as Christian, our faith tells us that we can always count on God for a glorious and miraculous outcome. Let's see what the psalmist has to write. Hear me, O God, or hear me, my God, as I voice my complaint. Protect my life from the threat of the enemy. Hide me from the conspiracy of the wicked, from the plot of evildoers. They sharpen their tongues like swords and aim cruel words like deadly arrows. They shoot from ambush at the innocent. They shoot suddenly without fear. They encourage each other in evil plans. They talk about hiding their snares. They say, who will see it? They plot injustice and say, we have devised a perfect plan. Surely the human mind and heart are cunning. But God will shoot them with his arrows. They will suddenly be struck down. He will turn their own tongues against them and bring them to ruin. All who see them will shake their heads in scorn. All people will fear. They will proclaim the works of God and ponder what he has done. The righteous will rejoice in the Lord and take refuge in him. All the upright in heart will glory in him. Sometimes we can't see that type of outcome. Because in our narrow human point of view, we place limits on what God's glory and miracles look like. We believe that the only miracle available to maybe a cancer patient is a complete physical healing. But what about the spiritual miracle that may come to the cancer patient in the midst of their disease? What about the glorious family relationship, renewal that may be healed and strengthened because of this crisis? What about a grieving son's vow to make things right with his children? Those are miraculous outcomes. Now, the God we worship doesn't send disease or tragedy to bring about a specific end. But he does work within and through those circumstances to bring about good, to bring about his glory. In Matthew's gospel, Christ told everyone to come to him, all that are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and he will give us rest. Well, guess what? Being a Christian doesn't exempt us from pain. It doesn't give us a free pass on suffering. Christ certainly knew pain, and Christ certainly knew suffering, which is why he could say, come to me. I've been there. I felt it, and I will give you rest. The miracle that God can and will deliver is the miracle of a God that cares enough about you, and you alone, to show up, to cry, and to bring comfort. When we trust him with our pain, when we give him our suffering, he will sustain us and give us rest. Some of the saddest images that you can even picture are pictures of people, husbands and daughters and mothers hanging around their necks, walking in the streets, hoping and praying for miracles. The miracle of their loved one being alive. And while they should hope and pray for that, I hope they'll continue to pray, staying in tune for the miracle that God will deliver, because he will. In our limited understanding, we may not be able to fully grasp how God will bring about a glorious and miraculous outcome from such terrible tragedies that will occur in our future. But when we go to this psalm and we look at verse 10, let the righteous rejoice in the Lord and take refuge in him. The answer is refuge in the Lord, not revenge. The answer is standing firm in our faith, not striking back in anger. Yes, we absolutely must find the Lord during this time. God will take care of us. God will triumph in the end, and God's grace and mercy will continue to flow. Billy Graham stated, "We can either implode or stand firm on the foundation of our faith. Let the righteous rejoice in the Lord and take refuge in him." Been watching a lot of documentaries on Netflix, and I watched the movie on Netflix, and it talks about a lot of grief and grieving and people that are just evil. The one that I just watched recently was The Good Nurse. And then now I almost finished the documentary about how they caught the guy. This guy, this individual out in, I think it was Pennsylvania or Virginia or somewhere, he was just murdering patients in the hospital by injecting them or injecting their IV bags with digoxin. He was pure evil. And that question right there comes to mind. Like, where was God in that? Why was this allowed to happen? Why does evil happen? Because the devil still exists. This devil is real. People, get it into your minds that the devil has principalities and powers. There are demons that work with him to bring about hatred and evil in this world. Now, some of those families were angry, and justly so. And they could have had revenge. They could have went after the guy. They could have killed him while he's sitting there in the courtroom. But God would take care of it, as he takes care of us all. Our enemy is the devil. Our enemy are the wicked. Our enemy are the evildoers. And we have to find comfort in the Lord and rejoice in him, because he will see us through anything they may throw in our paths. Anything. So we're going to pray today. Hear us, our God, as we voice our complaint. Protect our lives from the threat of the enemy. Hide us from the conspiracy of the wicked, from the plots of the evildoers. They sharpen their tongues like swords and name cruel words like deadly arrows. They shoot from ambush at the innocent. They shoot suddenly without fear. They encourage each other in evil plans. They talk about hiding their snares. They say, who will see it? They plot injustice and say, we've devised a perfect plan. Surely the human mind and heart are cunning, but God will shoot them with his arrows. They will suddenly be struck down. He will turn their own tongues against them and bring them to ruin. All who see them will shake their heads in scorn. All people will fear They will proclaim the works of God and ponder what he has done. The righteous will take refuge in the Lord and will rejoice in him. All the upright in heart will glory in him. We pray this through the prayer that Jesus taught his disciples to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation. Deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. So when tragedy strikes you, where suffering comes to you, who do you run to? Who will you run to? I recommend you run to the Lord. Run to the Lord. Because if you rely on yourself, it's not going to end very well. If you take revenge on the individual, it's not going to end very well. Because we will have pain and suffering in this world. And like Jesus said, come to me, you who are weary, and I will give you rest. My yoke is light. It's not heavy. We do not have to carry the burdens of life on our back any longer. We could turn them over to Jesus and he will carry them for us. Come to him. Well, folks, I hope my son does well today in his tournament. See, something different. He's doing a bowling tournament, so that's interesting. Hopefully he gets a pretty good score. He averages about 125-ish, but recently he's kind of jumped up in the score, and his practices, I've yet to see it, because I don't go to his practices, I go to the meets. And I guess he bowled over a 200 the other day in practice. And it's like, okay, I can't wait to see that actually happen in a game. You know, that'd be awesome to see. Because there's days it's like he does pretty good, like about 150, 160 every so often I catch. But then there's days it was like 80s, and it's like, what are you doing? So we'll see how he goes today. Well, thank you for watching today, and thank you for being online with me. But yeah, pain and suffering is going to happen, folks. And it's where you run to is what really matters. It really matters. God bless you all, and have a great week.